Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rav Shmuel, Rabbi Stephen, with you with this week's Devar Torah, my 10-minute Torah for Parashat Bo. Uh, you know, it was really exciting this past week. We had our Sofer on site come in and check our Torah, and let's face it, I'm a Judaism geek. I'm a Jew geek, right? I just love all things Jewish. I do. You see the two Chumashes shaped as little Torah scrolls, and you see my library in the background. I've got quite an extensive books that I'm very proud of. Chumashim, prayer books. That is the Zohar from the Kabbalah Center in LA. On the bottom, we've got the Talmud. I do not as yet have a complete set, but I'm working on it. So, and to have a Sofer who is a rabbi who specializes in checking Torah scrolls to make sure all the letters are intact, they haven't faded, parchment isn't ripped to the point where it can't be read. And what's really exciting about it is not to see somebody proofread a Torah, but it's the things that they talk about during the process, specific letters. The fact that there's such a difference between the Ashkenazi writing and the Sephardic writing. The Sephardic writing is more, it isn't as embellished. It's very basic, a lamed, like this, one stroke. The Ashkenazi, they make one stroke here, they put the long line here, they make a curve here, they put it down. So he says that a Sephardic scroll, Torah scroll, can be written in about 6 months. He says an Ashkenazi scroll can be written in about 10 months. So, things like that I just love talking about and hearing about. And this is the gentleman that said the word mitzvah, which we all take for granted as meaning commandment, actually comes from the word that means to connect. So it's a connection to God, not necessarily a commandment. And by doing mitzvah, we're doing Hashem's will. And by that way, we stay in contact with Hashem. Okay, so one of the things that I've not talked about on these 10-minute Torahs, on these Devar Torah that I do, that I have talked about in the synagogue during sermons, is the notion of anti-Semitism. I might have mentioned it a few times, but when we look at the Torah and we look at what it's teaching us and telling us and a way to connect with Hashem, it's very timeless. It's not something that happened 35 years ago and it's our history, so we should pay attention to it, but rather it's a lesson for the ages. It tells us what's going on. So in this week's portion, Bo, come the Pharaoh, we have the culmination of the plagues, of the signs and wonders that God is showing Pharaoh. Look, I'm the one ultimate force in the universe. And I use the word force. When I was 14, I had a rabbi, I was involved in a confirmation class. And the rabbi said that what made Abraham so distinct from all the other people living during the time is, after the incident where he smashes the idols and, puts a big bat or a big club in the hands of the one remaining big idol, father comes home, he says, what happened? Abraham said, oh, that one idol got all jealous of the other idols and smashed them. And I think the club went to good use on Abraham's backside, or Avram's backside as he was back then. But he went atop a mountain, looked around and said, there's this force that created, maintains, sustains the universe. And that's where his epiphany of the one true God came from, which I find absolutely fascinating. So Abraham was the first one to realize this. And then, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the 12 brothers, Moses, Aaron, Joshua, David, Solomon, the people that came after him perpetuated this idea and developed it. And we grew as a people. And when you see what's going on in Egypt here, our people have been enslaved for about 110 years, give or take. A new pharaoh, right? That wanted to consolidate his power. This is my interpretation. So found an enemy for people to rally around, make himself more, I'm the one that's going to protect you type of thing. So after about where are we at? We're at the last 3 plagues. So after 6 or 7 plagues in the last portion, we culminate in the killing of the firstborn. Now, Rabbi Hertz in the Hertz Chumash made a very interesting comment. We read that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but God did not interfere with Pharaoh's will. Pharaoh could have changed his mind any time. There's the Kabbalistic saying, one who pursues righteousness is led on the path. One who pursues evil is shown the way. Pharaoh pursued evil. We talked about this last week. And Pharaoh refused to relent. He saw these strangers, these Hebrews, that went from 70 souls that came down to Egypt to now we're 2.5 million. We've multiplied. We've integrated in Egyptian society. This is what we Jews do. And here Pharaoh has enslaved us, and yet we've grown as a people. We failed to be killed. We failed to be destroyed. And this is the story of us throughout the ages. We lost our kingdom of Judea. The Romans defeated us, destroyed our temple in 70 CE, or for those of you that are not Jewish, 70 AD. And most of us left. They were still Jews. There's always been Jews in our land, in our ancient heritage, Judea, Palestine. The name Palestine, by the way, comes from what the Romans renamed the area, Syria Palestina. Palestine is the Latin word for Philistine, because they knew that the Philistines were like our mortal enemies. So what better way to destroy us emotionally than to rename the land of our enemies? But even Palestine, right? The Balfour Declaration, beginning of the last century, was about the Jews returning to Palestine and creating, Israel, creating our homeland. So we returned there. A lot of people returned. There had always been Jews there. We returned and we built our land, and we survived. We've survived under the worst persecution of the last 1800 years. There have been attacks on us, and yet here we are. Same thing here. Pharaoh tried to destroy us, and the tables were turned on him. Just like peoples have tried to destroy us Jews, and yet we've survived, and we are survivors. We make do with what we have. We make a go of it. They say that while all this was going on, the Levites were still keeping the faith, and that's what made them so special. So we have a defining moment in who we are here. Really the beginning of us, not just as the Hebrew or the Israelites, but as a Jewish people in terms of religion. We have the killing of the firstborn. And this is the ultimate example of measure for measure. Now, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. In Judaism, that's never to be taken literally. It's really a way of reckoning the financial penalties. But murder's different, because when somebody kills somebody, you can't undo it. If somebody steals your sheep back then, right? Or somebody steals your car, okay, they can buy you a new car. They can work it off. In this society, we send people to prison. Back then, they said, okay, if you can't pay for this person's sheep that you stole and slaughtered or sold, whatever, then you're going to work it off. And that's what happened. So our system of justice is a little different. But because Pharaoh sought to destroy, and did in fact kill the Israelite firstborn, now it's the Egyptian firstborn that are going to be killed. And not just babies. There's a measure of compassion, in this. And it's a firstborn of every family. Every family had one person that met their doom. Now, we look at this as being severe, but when you look at the persecution and oppression of the Egyptians, beating us, making us work for free, killing us, finding ways to work us to death, killing our firstborn, this was measure for measure. And that's what happened. While this is going on, we are to slaughter a lamb, eat the lamb, the Paschal lamb, right, overnight. And if you have too few people, you invite another family in, and that way there's nothing left over. You take the blood, put it on both sides of your doorpost, and that way when God sends the destroyer out, God knows that I'm going to pass over this house. It's the Marine Passover. So people say, well, if God's all-knowing, didn't he know who was an Israelite and who wasn't? Yes, but are you committed as an Israelite enough to actually do this, to put the blood on the line? That was the key thing. And this is the beginning of who we are. We find also inside this particular portion, we have the basis of the questions. This is what God did for me with the 4 sons. We also have at the end of the Parsha, we have 2 sections that were put into our tefillin. It talks about a sign upon your arm, upon your head, and they are part, and if you're very Orthodox, if you're very traditional, then you also recite those in the morning as well during your morning prayers. So, okay. Many of you know I will be away the first week of February, the first few days of February. I may not do this. I may do it a little early. I will not be at synagogue. I've arranged to have coverage. I'm going to go see my father, who is 93 years young, and looking forward to visiting with him. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you for listening, and hope you're having a great week.